Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180, for the very best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock, and again on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock on Saturday, and for the best in Wednesday Talk Radio on 1410 KERI on Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and now, drumroll Clay, on 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Your host is Clay Koerner, and I'm Marty Pay, and behind the big board is our producer, Greg Held. Hey, Clay, that was a great show last week with Eric Blem, author of Fearless, the story of SEAL Team 6, and Adam Brown. His interview with the American sniper, Chris Kyle, a few months before he died was a really, really good interview. And that was a little heartwarming, but it was a great show. I really enjoyed that.
It was a great show. And you know what's interesting about, you talk about New Mexico, is former Governor Richardson's in town today.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, we are going to have the current governor of New Mexico, Martinez. I've talked to her people, and we're probably going to have her on sometime next month.
I hope so.
Yeah. I really enjoyed our first guest last week, though. Dave Kindred, talking about his book, Sound and Fury, the story of Howard Cosell and Muhammad Ali. Or I should say Howard Cosell and Muhammad Ali. That's kind of my era. I remember those fights. I think I saw every one of Cosell's fights closed circuit, which in those days...
I didn't know Cosell fought.
No. Cosell used to narrate the fights.
You said you saw every one of his fights.
His meaning Ali.
Oh.
Are we going to do this today?
Yeah, let's go.
Are you going to behave? Just because you got your nap, you're going to be a little testy this morning.
I'm excited about our guest.
I am too, because for the full hour, we have an old friend of the program. This is the first time I get to say this. CNN commentator and author of American Individualism, the great-granddaughter of President Herbert Hoover, Margaret Hoover. Margaret, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thanks for having me back.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Well, I got to ask you the obvious question. Well, first of all, your book's now in paperback, right?
Yeah.
How's it
hit the shelves yesterday.
Good.
You can get it for, let's see, it's $14.99. Nope, $15. They don't do $14.99 anymore. They told me at Random House. I think they caught on. Consumers are too smart to realize that it's not actually that much less expensive by only a penny. You do the $14.99 versus $15. But or you can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble for even less. I think it's $12.99. So pick it up. Pick it up. You guys have been great proponents of it, and I so appreciate that over the years. And frankly,
well, actually,
it came out 18 months ago, and it was about the Republican Party and what we need to do to make sure we're relevant. And my God, it's almost more relevant now than it was when it came out in 2011.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at my
I read about all these things that the RNC autopsy report talked about yesterday when it came out. So I certainly hit the mark in terms of what we're all thinking we need to do.
Well, I got to ask you two questions here. First of all, enjoy the book, because I wrote one 20-some-odd years ago. And I have to tell you, it's funny, because a friend of mine told me the other day he saw it on Amazon for $1.50. So times do change.
When it comes down, I'll buy a copy.
Yeah, when it comes down, right. It costs more to ship it than it does to buy the book.
Can you get it on Kindle? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, there you go. For me, it's books on tape. So I didn't hear about this autopsy report that the Republican Party came up with?
You didn't hear about it?
No, and that came out yesterday?
Oh, yeah. Well, so actually they released bits of it to the press on Sunday night, so I got a little sneak peek. But I had actually been talking. Basically what happened, we got, you may have noticed, November 2012 wasn't a great month for Republicans. We sort of got slaughtered at the polls,
yes.
Really across the board. Lost lots of Senate seats that we expected to get, not to mention the presidential race, many House seats that we probably should have held on to, although not as bad in the House. Anyway, it was sort of a calamitous month for Republican politics. And I don't know, you guys might have noticed that. Maybe you didn't.
Yeah, I think it's kind of tough not to notice that.
Well, the RNC and Reince Priebus appointed a panel of folks. Ari Fleischer was one of them. He's just somebody I know from my Bush days. When I worked in the White House for President Bush, he was, of course, the White House press secretary at the beginning of the Bush administration, and Ari was one of the folks who was on this sort of panel that was tasked with spending about 3 months talking to everybody in the Republican Party, then talking to folks outside the Republican Party, trying to figure out what went wrong. Because Republicans did so uniformly bad that they put together a report. The report's about 130 pages, And it's a pretty thorough, comprehensive report. And I'll say, just from my own experience, I ran into a lot of people they talked to. They talked to a lot of people, and they also went and talked to a lot of people who aren't the usual suspects. And they came out with a report for what Republicans ought to do better. It was sort of colloquially called the autopsy report. And I sort of joked, how can you have these guys at the RNC who are part of the, as I said, part of the problem. I mean, I don't think the RNC did us any favors in 2012. And they're supposed to tell us what we did wrong and how to fix it. But I think they put together a pretty thoughtful report. And one of the things they talked about many things. They talked about why we lost single women by double digits, why we lost Hispanics by 70+%, why we are losing the millennial generation, which is, of course, as you guys know, what my entire book is about. And so actually, I spoke to Ari before, as they were working on the report as well, to give him my 2 cents. And I'm pretty pleased with it. But it means that the substance of my book is more relevant than ever as we try to figure out how to regenerate the party.
Exactly. Our guest by phone, author of American Individualism, Margaret Hoover.
Hey, Margaret, there was a big Republican love fest that took place recently, and they came out and endorsed, I guess, number one was Rand Paul, followed by Rubio, and then Cruz. So what's the significance of these endorsements?
Well, yeah, the Love Fest is, I think, CPAC was what you're referring to, the convention of young political activists who self-identify as conservative. That's the one, right?
Yeah, is it just young political activists?
Well, have you been to a CPAC?
No, thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, I think the median age there is probably 27.
There's a good reason why I haven't been there.
Well, there's mostly young folks. I mean, you've got a lot of grassroots organizers from across the country, but I'd say it skews very young. The bulk of, I just guessed on the median age, don't quote me on that, but there's a high density of very young, energetic, conservative voices there. CPAC has never been indicative of actually who gets a nomination, but it's certainly indicative of where enthusiasm is. And I think it's been a really interesting run for Rand Paul. I think it suggests that we probably shouldn't write him off based on, I think, the enthusiasm, the energy he generated around his 13-hour filibuster, which was, brought a really important issue about drones and whether the federal government has, whether the president, not even the federal government, the one person in the presidency has the right to kill an American on American soil that is not an imminent threat to American national security through a drone strike, unilaterally, without any checks and balances, was a really worthwhile cause. It was a really worthwhile question. He elevated that. I thought it was well done. It was well executed, and it was, it showed the same sort of passion that you saw the youth and millennials rally around behind his father, Ron Paul, when he was running for president. What they liked about Ron Paul is that he meant what he said, and he said what he meant. And, to heck with the politics. And I think you saw a little of that with Rand Paul. So going into CPAC and winning the straw poll, I think was interesting. He's sort of channeling the ethos of the younger generation in a way that is giving a fresh boost to conservatism.
Well, I hope so. We need a fresh boost if we're going to do anything in the future.
I agree with you. Certainly agree with you there.
I'm sorry.
We got to find a way to begin to connect with this rising generation of Americans. The millennials, in 2020, there will be somewhere between 90 million and 100 million millennials voting. I mean, right now, there's always, when my book came out, the numbers are 27 million more millennials. Millennials are, they're born at the beginning of the Reagan era through the end of the Clinton presidency. So they're basically the 33 and under. And they're the largest generation in American history. There's 27 million more of them than baby boomers, 17 million more of them than Generation X. So they're the biggest generation in American history, and they have certain sensibilities. They're technologists, they're globalists. They volunteer more than any generation before them. They want to be part of something larger than themselves. They vote. It doesn't. You always hear, "Oh, the kids don't vote. The youth, they don't turn out." Well, that was true of Generation X when they were young voters, but it's not true of the millennials. The millennials vote in much higher proportions than Generation X did when it was coming of age. So it's important to understand sort of what has shaped this generation, and then figure out how to connect our ideas if we really believe that conservative ideas have the best policy solutions for this generation, we need to figure out how to relate to them, how to communicate with them, and how to make the case in a way that's going to be believable.
You know, Margaret, I'm glad we've got you for the full hour because we're going to, I can see I'm scratching notes as we're talking here. So when we come back, I want to ask you a question about Rand Paul and the autopsy report. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.